Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, the uh, latest in our series of business webinars under the Santander Business Events program that we've been running in conjunction with Smarta. Sorry for the slight delay today. I got kicked out of our software, so we had a few technical difficulties for some reason, but thank you everybody for holding on. Hopefully it'll be worth it, and I'm sure it will be, because we've got, again, two excellent guests with us today to discuss exporting. So the title of this webinar is Export 101, Trading Overseas. And I'm delighted to say that we've got Mark Collings with us, who is the Head of International for SMB at Santander, and also Adam Soffer, who I've known for a number of years, who runs a brilliant company called Joe and Seth's Gourmet Popcorn. And they're going to both show us their experiences of both growing a business that is really branching out into exporting, and also Mark's experiences of working with a number of businesses who are taking their first steps into overseas trade. So I'm going to start things off today by just asking Mark and Adam to introduce themselves. So Adam, would you like to go first and just tell us who you are and a little bit about Joe and Seth's?
Sure. So I'm Adam Sofa, obviously. We, along with my parents, started Joe and Seth's back in 2010. Slightly unorthodox, but we are a proper family business, and we're all about making the best tasting popcorn out there. It was a bit of a punt when we started. I would love to say there was some strategy behind it, but it was genuinely my dad's recipes, and my dad is called Joseph, hence the name Joe and Seth's. And we took them to a food show in 2010, and people absolutely adored them. And it was out of that show that we very quickly realised that actually we should kind of have a go at turning this into a business. And we are now recognised to be the premium popcorn out there. We've got 40 flavours, stocked in great places including Waitrose, Ocado, Cineworld, and lots of great stores including Selfridges and Harrods. But more interestingly for this call, we also export to over 15 countries as well now.
Brilliant. And Mark, if you could introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Mark Collings. I'm the Head of International for small and medium enterprises within the Santander business. I have a team of international directors across the UK who, mine and their existence is very much to take away the fear factors for SMEs going into new international markets and helping them grow their businesses from an export perspective. So really delighted to join the call this afternoon.
Brilliant, thank you both. I'd like to start with you, Adam, and if you could just tell us kind of how Joe and Seth's has begun to start exporting, really, and when you guys first looked at it in your story. So how early on in the journey were you already thinking about exporting to overseas markets?
So we got our first listing in April 2011, which is in Selfridges. And I think when you pick up stores like Selfridges and Harrods and Harvey Nichols, those kind of quite premium, prestigious ones, a lot of the international premium store buyers visit them quite regularly to see exactly what they can copy and take back with them. And so very soon after that listing, probably only 3 months after, we got our first kind of inquiry from France, a premium store over there who wanted to take it. And everyone always says the traditional thing about food businesses only do export when you have the resource and you can really do it. We kind of ignored that and sent popcorn. It's quite fortunate, it's ambient. We sent it over to France on TNT, and that was our first listing. Since then, we've become a bit more strategic and kind of going to international trade shows like Bial in Paris and Uga in Germany and Gulf Foods in Dubai, which are our kind of big target markets at the moment. Where we kind of look at slightly larger retailers and kind of other areas like cinemas as well. But yeah, certainly it was absolutely reactive to begin with, and has only really recently become a bit more proactive.
And have you found that is it clear now that it's exporting is a key part of your business model? Will you find it easier to perhaps reach new markets and expand overseas as you would perhaps by continuing to do it across the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially if you've got a premium product, it does depend. So we're lucky at Ambient. It's not the longest shelf life. It's 6 months. But because it's Ambient, we can just send it relatively easily overseas. But yeah, for us, it's become absolutely key. So as a premium product, there are a relatively limited number of stores where your product will work. And if it's a new category like popcorn was when we started, it takes some time for everyone to slightly wake up to the fact that it's a new category and to want your product on their shelves. So in the meantime, you can supply all the various other places around the world that are there already. They're in that space where actually popcorn is a premium, is a category they need to be stocking other brands. And so to give you an idea, when we started, obviously it was a nothing could follow our business last year. It was about 15% export in terms of percentage of turnover. But my target is very much to take that to 25% over the next year or so.
Brilliant. Mark, can you talk to us about the businesses that you're typically seeing beginning to export and how early in their journey it is as well?
Yeah, sure. We're seeing a lot of UK businesses wanting to export, very much, post recession towards the end of, the 2008, 2009. Businesses are now looking to diversify into new markets, not only to help with growth of sales, but also to protect, in a way, Matt, around making sure that their risk management of being in a number of different markets helps them if there's any sort of issues within sort of either the domestic or the more local markets. So we're seeing a lot of SMEs interested in export. The piece that Adam just touched on there around resources, we very much see ourselves and also other professional partners or advisors as fundamental resource to help SMEs when they have that lack of knowledge, almost fear of going into those new markets, as partners that the SMEs in the UK need to tap into to help with pretty much connection and how do you identify those initial markets and which will be the best markets to go into. So we're seeing a lot of ambitious SMEs wanting to export, Matt. It's our role and the role of the professional firms to help select and choose and enter those markets which are of value to the SMEs.
Just to add to that, actually, as well, the other big benefit I didn't mention of export is most exports, certainly our arena, is pro forma, i.e. it's cash up front. It's only really when you kind of progress a bit further down the line with a company and you can kind of insist within sort of 12 months, really, have pro forma for at least 12 months, that you need to start doing kind of things like potentially letter of credits and these sorts of longer payment terms. So actually, export is a great way to get cash in quite quickly in that fast growth phase.
So I feel that's a really, definitely a really interesting point. Everybody listening in, I'm going to carry on interviewing Mark and Adam, and we'll continue our discussion. But you do have a questions box on your control panel, so please do fill in your questions there, and I'll put them to Mark and Adam. So we absolutely want to cover all the questions that you may have, and feel free to tell us what businesses you're running as well, so that we can give you a shout out as well. Adam, you mentioned that you were fairly reactive to start with. Can you talk to us about the markets that you've chosen to focus on? Now you're really targeting certain markets and why you've chosen those?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting actually. So when we started, I guess like most companies, I don't know, I could be wrong, but we sort of saw, okay, we're going to export. Well, we should start in France and Ireland and Germany, the sort of the markets near to us that I guess we've done before and very easy. But actually, what we found, and so certainly that's where we focused. Certainly where most of the original interest was from, and where we focused on when we did start kind of becoming practice. But kind of changed on that. One, because the exchange rate is shocking, frankly, which means that actually getting the product on the shelf at a decent retail price is quite tough at the moment. And two, because actually for premium products, especially with that real British made in the UK premium quality branding like that we have on our product, Asia and Middle East and these parts of the world actually are potentially bigger markets. If you have an idea, Japan is 120 million and quite an affluent population. Obviously, UK is 60 million, while somewhere like Ireland is substantially smaller. So we certainly become more proactive on Asia and the Middle East as a result of kind of two factors, I guess, the euro being a bit of a pain and actually there being a fantastic demand out there for our product.
And Mark, are you seeing those? Are those reflected on the trends that you're seeing as well?
Yeah, most definitely. The emerging markets, you'll hear a lot about the BRIC countries and also the MINT. So Brazil, China, Mexico, Nigeria, Turkey, etc. Those markets are really growing fast. And the point that Adam mentioned around the British brand travels globally very quickly now. And my recent experiences with some UK SMEs at the end of last year, actually on the ground in Brazil as part of our trade mission there, really opened the eyes of SMEs that exporting further afield into those emerging markets and the scale of those markets, by physical population and physical economic growth can be hugely attractive and a great opportunity for UK SMEs, but a fear factor through the sort of the language challenges, the different cultural challenges are areas that we and other professional partners and I would say the UKTI, the government's backed scheme and team to help businesses go into those markets can clearly change the complete profile of UK SMEs around how they go about their business. And as a specific example, a company we took into São Paulo and Rio in the space of 12 months will increase their turnover fourfold in a market that they 12 months ago would have been very frightened about and wouldn't have seen the opportunity for them. So completely agree with Adam that longer haul emerging markets can often be where the bigger opportunity is, but with that opportunity sometimes the bigger risks and bigger threats are.
Yeah, I'll totally agree with Mark on that. UKTI are a massive kind of port of call, really helpful organisation. It's very rare that you would kind of hear many people sort of talking very positively about a lot of government organisations, but they are really good. And what I didn't know is there's a whole world out there of embassies in each country, which of course you think about from a political perspective, but I never thought about from helping a business. And in each embassy around the world, there is someone there whose job it is to build trade with that country, and so they are a really great port of call. For example, you're trying to get into the States or Russia or wherever it is in the world. This distributor, have you heard of them? Are they a decent company, or are they going to take me for a ride? Even just simple questions like that are really valuable. And then more strategically, they do help with trade shows, and there's also some grants as well.
Yeah, it was Matt. A specific in Brazil was the UKTI down on the ground arranged a networking event of about 150 local businesses that had a interest in the UK SMEs that were in the local market during that visit, and the amount of business that was developed through those trade flows organised by the local embassy was significant. So for anybody sort of listening in on the call today, is if you haven't yet embraced and worked with your local international trade advisor as part of the UKTI, search them out, because they can be really key to helping choose the right markets, the right supply chain opportunities, and also the right partners to work with when going into those markets.
I think that's an interesting point. And do you want to quickly? You talked about kind of de-risking the kind of the threats of exporting as well. And Mark, it'd be interesting from your point to hear what those common pitfalls are, and the areas where people perhaps don't know what they don't know until they're actually out there and doing it. And then I guess, Adam, if you could follow on with some of the things that, some of the lessons that you learned, or perhaps even some of the mistakes that you made early on.
Yeah, sure, Matt. I think the key here is choosing the right partners, and you just can't beat that local knowledge. So as much as it's great for UK SMEs sourcing new trading partners overseas, the fundamental especially from a finance perspective, is making sure you get paid, and also making sure that those overseas partners are not only new, but they're reliable. And by using the local knowledge of your bank, your audit firm, so your accountancy partner, maybe a legal firm in the UK that's got that overseas presence, can make sure that the supply chain is robust, and most importantly, that the UK SME gets paid. And we very much see that that's our role, to help with that local knowledge as a global partner, and making sure that as much as the supply chain and the sales turnover is going to grow, the fundamental is that you get paid at a fair and appropriate term, and that the commercials, when you factored in all of the costs of exporting into a new market, stack up. So the balance there, Matt, is around getting reliable trading partners that you can identify, and have people making sure that the due diligence and the appropriateness of who you're going to trade with is the same as trading with a domestic partner in the UK that you can visit and see on a regular basis. So they would be the fundamentals that we would suggest SMEs focus on before going into new markets.
Brilliant. And Adam?
Yeah, I guess from my side, one thing we have fortunately been quite good on is on the payment side. It's very easy you will get lots of emails from people going, I am so-and-so in the US, and they might have a website with loads of big logos on. And there's we probably get 2 or 3 emails a day asking, can we distribute your product in sort of certain countries? My view has always been the very first thing is, unless they take pro forma payment, i.e. payment up front, period, we will not deal with you. So we've been quite fortunate on that regard. I guess where we've made a few errors has been on, certainly where we got a bit carried away, and there was one in Turkey, a really big hotel group which did stack up and was very legitimate. They paid up front. We did all that. That was correct. What we didn't know was that there was all sorts of funny regulations in Turkey about what can and couldn't go into the country, and what certificates you did and didn't need. And the goods were stuck in customs for best part of 4 months, and they've already been shipped for sort of 2 months or so. So they only got released at the date in which they hit their shelf life, and the entire kind of order had to get thrown away. So I guess my bit of advice would be, it's great as you can be around insisting on money up front, or checking that your bank has got letter of credits and those sorts of things in place. Certainly understanding the regulations of each market, which can be very different, is important. The other bit of advice where kind of I would offer is, use your network. I mean, Mark, for instance, says on the phone, certainly your bank can be really helpful and offer you kind of support, particularly around finance. UKTI we mentioned, but I speak to kind of other people in my who are doing similar things to me in other non-competing categories. So someone exporting, a guy who runs a nut business or a crisp business, we speak quite regularly. And if I'm not sure about what to do in a certain market, who the biggest distributor is and that sort of thing, we'll generally share contacts or run one by each other, so that we all don't get kind of screwed up as a bunch of companies. So very much use your network would be my other bit of advice.
Okay, we've got some questions. So the first one is from Gil Kahana, who asks about shipping costs. So, and she also asks about whether you'd ever thought about producing the product in the country that you're exporting it to. Adam, that's not something you do, is it? But it'd be good if you could talk to us about shipping costs.
Yeah, I guess I don't know how much the person asked the question knows in terms of shipping, but certainly there are these things that we found out called Incoterms, which are a legal term of shipping, which kind of everyone in international shipping seems to know. And depending on the different Incoterm, in terms of X works, which would be where the company comes and collects from you, CIF, or there's all these different ones, SDA, depending on the shipping term, depends on the shipping costs, because of course if you're delivering it to someone versus just delivering it to the ship that then sails with your goods on, or if you're delivering it, all the way to the door of the person's house. In terms of how we price products, we have a kind of fairly simple rule that is, we want everyone to collect the goods from us, because it means we don't have the risk of kind of the problem that we had in Turkey that I talked about, for example, because it's not my responsibility if that was to happen. But where we do deliver to someone directly, we would just charge a price and then be quite transparent on the shipping price as to what that cost looks like. So the costs are very different between sea and air shipping as well. Generally, air shipping is sort of 8 times as expensive as sea shipping, so obviously the preference would always be sea if you can do that.
And Mark, anything to add on shipping costs?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, Gil, thank you very much for the question. I think this comes back to the partners piece, and what we do within Santander as part of our trade club and our trade portal is we provide all of that sort of information around shipping documents, shipping costs, time at port, customs documentation, all in one place, which helps the SME with those questions, issues, and almost blind spots that they wouldn't have going into those markets. Again, the UKTI should be able to help with that. And again, I'm getting bored of saying the same message actually, but that's where the partners and the advisors can help you understand the costs, which can vary, quite considerably from country to country, from port to port, and getting that information up front is key before going into those markets. Just to point out for our clients across the group globally, that those information within our trade portal and our trade club are free. So if we can help with any SMEs take away some of those knowledge gaps, we'd love to sort of have the discussion as to how we can support you. But these are all things that the SME needs to think about before going into those markets, as Adam's just said. Earlier in the call, Adam also mentioned how currency risk can also affect the profitability of the new export market, and these are all things that need to be thought about and decided on before actually entering into the new markets.
We're going to take a few more questions, but Mark, do you quickly want to tell us about the international exporting hub that you've got at Santander? Because I know that when we did an in-person live event a number of weeks ago, everybody in the audience was really impressed by it and just wanted to know more. So do you want to quickly tell us about what it has to offer customers that are thinking of exporting?
Yeah, sure. So at Santander Trade Portal, it is effectively a one-stop shop of all of the challenges, all of the information, all of the support that an SME would need in order to go into new markets. It hangs off 5 main pillars. The first pillar is what markets can be identified for the SME. So it shows, let's say, I'll use Brazil as an example. So it will show Brazil is a market of growth, of importing of the product, and it hangs off what's termed the HS code, which is a product or service code very specific based on the UK SME. So it says which markets are importing, what are the highest growing markets for the UK SME. It then identifies companies, and it gives company direct information of who is importing those products and how to make direct contact with them. It also then shows what finance challenges, so currency risk, what banking requirements are needed in order to set up in those markets. We just touched on earlier the shipment costs. It gives a full suite of shipment documentation, terms, conditions, taxations, custom requirements that are required when going into those markets. And then the last pillar, when the UK SME maybe is further along the growth curve, it will give them support on how to actually establish yourself, whether that's a subsidiary or a manufacturing plant within those local markets. So it's very much pulling together everything that's required that an SME would need when going into those markets into one place. As part of the Santander Trade Club, we have approximately 5 million businesses that bank with us across the globe. And that's across approximately 14,400 branches where we have that local knowledge in our core markets. And we also have a number of alliance partners, so other banks that we work with in markets where Santander doesn't have that local knowledge. And it enables our clients to connect and make sure that they're dealing with those reliable trading partners that I touched on earlier. Also, as part of that trade club, it provides partnership services with companies that maybe specialize on freight forwarding, on human resource, on language skills, and also on sort of connections down in the ground. So it's taking away those challenges that the SME has, and in one place providing them with all the tools, all the support mechanism before going into those new markets. And as I touched on earlier, Matt, for our clients in the UK, the Santander trade services are free. They're very much seen as a value add that we can help SMEs go into those markets and build a genuine long-term international partnership with them.
Thanks, Mark. It really is a great resource, and I'm not saying that just because we work with Santander. I've checked it out myself, and lots of the attendees and the small businesses, like everybody that's listening in, who are using it and looking at it at the live event we did, were just incredibly impressed. And I think the common response was, "Why didn't I know about this before?" So I would urge you all to sort of to speak to the guys at Santander and check it out if you are thinking of beginning to explore, because it's hugely valuable. We have a question from Lois Phillips, and just before I read it out, please do remember to ask your questions. So we've got about 20 odd minutes left now. I'd like to get everybody's questions answered. You've got a small questions widget on your control panel, so make sure that you type your questions in there. Lois wants to ask about the best payment options for a micro business looking to enter into new markets. Adam, what do you use to take payments?
First of all, by the way, Mark, I wasn't aware of your export resources. That sounds really quite useful. I wish we'd had that a couple of years ago. But in terms of we take mainly bank payments through fax, but we do also use PayPal, which has its positives and its negatives, but we found it pretty useful to take fairly small payments from overseas customers who are even purchasing on our website. It's quite an easy way of taking payments. I don't really have too much experience in kind of much more than that. I think there's a much more kind of new, quite interesting payment systems out there. but Mark can probably talk better about those.
Yeah, sure, Adam. Lois, thank you ever so much for the question. Yeah, there's a variety of different payment options, and fundamentally it will come down to your local banking partner really understanding what's right for your business at that particular time. Adam spoke earlier around letters of credit. You can trade when you've got sort of longer term, more established suppliers on more of an open account arrangement. We in Santander have a unique finance facility which is called supply chain finance in SMEs. Other banks offer it very much to large multinationals. We offer it to SMEs, which very much provides the finance, so the risk, takes the risk on the buyer, who typically might be a larger business or might be a business that we've have a long-term banking relationship with in another market perhaps, which then releases the cash earlier into SME. And we sit here in 2015, not much different at times than in 2007, 2008. That cash is still king, and especially for micro businesses that are on startup mode, that financial partners need to release as much cash as they can and working capital quickly back into the SME to help that overall growth program. And then there's standard, payment facilities like international payments. So Adam mentioned backs earlier. We can make payments on other technical banking terms like SWIFT, CHAPS, etc. It's very much getting what's right for the business at their particular time, and actually what's right for the supply chain. And the earlier you can identify the right markets and the right reliable trading partners, that actually can help the finance that gets supported, whether it's Santander or another bank. It's about getting the right supply chain, and then there's a variety of different options out in the market. My advice as running an SME myself, which internationally trades, is making sure that you've got the right local partners who are giving you best advice on what's best for your business and how, as a smaller business, you're getting cash and working capital available that helps you with that growth piece.
Great, thank you. I had a question which I think possibly Mark, you may be best placed to answer, but Adam, feel free to chip in. It's from Nick Barkley, and he asked us if we could discuss exporting alcohol beverages to the USA. Mark, do you know if there's anything specific that we need to think about for alcohol going to the US?
Nick, thank you for the question. I'll be interested to know what alcohol it is, if there's any options to test before exporting. Do we know of anything specific? What I do know is, as part of our support, and actually we run, in 2015, we're going to run in the region of 10 trade missions into UK, and on trade missions that we've run in the last 3 or 4 years, we have taken a number of alcohol-based UK businesses into new markets, and specifically have taken them. I know there's been some micro breweries from the UK that we've taken into the US and have helped their expansion into those markets. So, Matt, I don't know, and I wouldn't be able to comment specifically on Nick's, exact type of alcohol and whether there's any specific restrictions. We can help. We have people on the ground in the US who can provide that advice appropriate for Nick. But generally, I don't see that there's any restrictions. But we need to know a little bit more about Nick's business, and we have proven case studies of actually taking alcohol-based businesses into new markets. And Adam's point earlier, some of the British flag that wraps around that particular industry is very attractive for exporting. And I was with a business last week that solely runs a freight forwarding concept that takes British brands, and particularly British food and beverage brands, into the large expat community in various places of the globe. So, Nick, let us know specifically if we can help. I'm not aware of anything that should stop you, but we'd need to know a little bit more about your business.
So Nick has replied to say it's a cider and wine business. I'm not sure if that adds anything to the insight you've got, Mark. But I think, Nick, if you want to get in touch with us afterwards, then we can definitely direct you to Mark. He might be able to give you a bit more of a more detailed response. The bit that I might add in is, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, specifically cider. We're working with a couple of very well-known UK cider brands and taking them into new markets, including the US. So one of those case studies that I just spoke about is actually in that particular specific sector. So definitely like to see if we can help Nick. And I mentioned the services that we've got and other professional firms, and we do quite a lot of work with 2 or 3 of the larger accountancy firms who will also have knowledge in those local markets, and our trade portal can specifically look at Nick's cider and wine export opportunities and where in the world are buying and who's buying and what's the opportunity and the issues in those particular markets. So I think we can definitely help, Nick, is the question, Matt. Or the answer, sorry.
Matt, the other thing I'd add to that, Matt, as well, I mean, Mark's right. I think all of those kind of resources that he talked about are really useful, and certainly if he's got experience of it with other brands, definitely worth putting in a call. But one thing we found is often if you're trying to export and you find a particular distributor that already has a British cider brand, you can often find them on Google or something like that. Give them a buzz and see if they're interested in your product. They've got experience of all the regulations and the forms and the freight forwarders and all these sorts of things. And if they're interested in your product, they probably help you through a lot of that process. And if they won't, certainly places like Mark and your accounting firm, etc., could as well.
I think the trade bodies are key, making sure that your trade bodies know who you are, what you're trying to do from an export perspective. They can also help with support mechanism, making sure that the IP gets managed as part of that overall export. So we work in parts of the UK with the food and drink trade bodies to help this overall, making Britain great from an export perspective. So that's another avenue for the SME to think about.
Brilliant. I've got a question now from Martin Hudspeth, who is exporting English food and healthcare products to China, but he's largely selling them through the Chinese marketplace, Taobao.com. And he's more interested in how does he approach supermarkets and wholesalers in China. At the moment, he's selling the way that he's selling is largely B2C, so he's interested in selling B2B. Not sure who wants to go first on this.
I mean, I can just offer one thing from, we were at, certainly at Martin's looking at food as well. There was a big food festival, a big trade show called IFE just a few weeks ago, actually, in the Docklands. And UKTI actually arranged a Meet the Buyer event where they flew over buyers from China. There was a couple of supermarkets and a couple of B2C online websites as well, kind of like the Amazons of China, I guess. And if the buyer is interested in meeting you and you're interested in meeting them, then you get to meet them for 15 minutes. So there's a few different things like that, again, through UKTI that I would recommend as a good port of call. And also there's a good bit on UKTI's website about kind of different opportunities and in China. The other thing I'd offer as well is if there's an obvious competing brand that Martin's got, is to kind of find out who their Chinese distributor is, and often you can kind of, again, do that through Google or through contacting the industry. And they will, once you've found out who they are, perhaps offer the product to them, or indeed it's quite easy then to understand who their competitors are and whether those other supermarkets might be relevant.
Anything to add on that one, Mark?
Yeah, my view is trade fairs are key. I should have mentioned it earlier, actually, Matt, that through our portal and club, it identifies by sector where all the trade fairs are across the world, so that can definitely help Martin. Again, partnership, I'd be looking, if I was Martin, I'd actually Google Chinese business clubs. We personally are members of the Chinese British Business Council. They exist for exactly that purpose that Martin's flagged around helping trade flows between the two markets increase, both import and export. So I think the Chinese British Business Council is an avenue that Martin should look to connect with. And also there's a number of private firms out there that specialise in doing business in China or doing business with China. So Google can provide some of those names. We work with some consultancy firms that help our clients into those particular markets. And recently, ourselves acquired a good share of Bank of Shanghai. So we have our contacts and network that we can maybe help Martin and other SMEs with. And it definitely comes back to partners, and global partners are key to opening the door into those markets and taking that fear factor away for the SME.
Okay, great. So we've got two more questions that I want to kind of get in. If anybody has a very quick question, and get it in now if you'd like us to answer it before the end. This one is from Cecilia Broadbent. She's wondering how to go about finding distributors abroad that are relevant to your product. Adam mentioned that he shared details with other companies that he knows, but I wondered if there are any other ways. So how to find distributors. Adam, how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, kind of a few different ways. Again, similar products that are stocked in that country. If you, for example, if there was a particular crisp brand, in our case a crisp brand, I would find out who distributes them in France or in whichever market it is that we're looking at. And a kind of quick search on Google will then find who distributes all those different brands in that country, and then I'll send samples for those different partners. Generally, I find that's the best way of doing that, and certainly if you look at, if you pick a really relevant one, really relevant competitor to yours, yeah, certainly that's the best thing I can find, how I've gone about it. We do get approached by distributors in countries wanting to distribute the product, and I would just do the reverse in that situation and find out who they distribute. And again, if there's any sort of, if it makes sense for them to distribute us because of who they distribute already and who they distribute to, then we would consider working with them.
Anything to add on that, Mark, about distribution?
Yeah, I just UKTI fundamental. There's also the Institute of Export. I'd get people to think about connecting with. My experience of the UKTI, especially when in overseas market, is outstanding, and the way that they can help connect, distributors for the UK SME. They're down on the ground. They understand the market opportunities. So that would be my very, very first point of call. And then some research, as Adam says, about the competition. And there's, I'd also be thinking about freight forwarders around. Are they, can they help with any distribution channels that they may have through your own networks or through the networks of other businesses or other professional firms.
Actually, Mark's point's really good there on the freight. Well, both on the UKTI, who would be really helpful, but also on the freight forwarders. One thing it took me a while to realise is, of course, these freight forwarders are sending your product to the US. They're also sending product for lots of other people to lots of other companies in the US. So if you can get a handle as to who else they work with, often they're quite nice, and we'll send some samples out with their next shipment to that company. And it's a great way of starting to build up a bit of a relationship.
Matt, as specific, the UKTI provide what's called an OMIS report, which stands for Overseas Market Information Service. There's a price that goes with that, and the International Trade Advisor for the UKTI locally will be able to provide the information and how much it physically costs the SME. But from my personal perspective, having seen this in action, I've seen it change the lives of SME owners by providing that direct in the local market information that helps provide, whether it's direct retailers, distribution networks, or actually I've seen it where the OMIS report has actually stopped an SME going into the market because it identified that there wasn't really that opportunity there. So that's something that I would be doing as a first point of call to answer the question about identifying distributors abroad. I'd be going down that avenue personally myself.
Thanks, mate. I think that's really valuable insight there, and certainly stuff that I didn't know about. So, yeah, really, really great feedback there, I think. Final question, unless we have a very quick one to pop up into the questions box before we run out of time. But this is from Andrew Macias, who wants to ask Adam if he has any non-delivery insurance, and if the customer, so the client that you're exporting to, demands that type of thing in their contracts.
To answer the question specifically, no, we don't have kind of insurance around. Well, I mean, our insurance is purely around getting the goods to where we've agreed to get them to. So if for whatever reason I was worried about whether I could get them to that particular country or destination, I would only kind of go where I was comfortable. So say I would have requested, for example, the company to come and collect them from us directly, or I would say I'd only deliver support in Southampton or whatever it might be. There is insurance out there. There's lots of kind of all sorts of different things, and again through the different financial instruments that you work with internationally. So with letter of credits and these sorts of different ways of, some of them do come with insurance. For example, Santander, I imagine, would have a product where they would guarantee the insurance on the goods until the point in which they're paid as well. So there are financial things in that way, but to answer the question specifically, no, we don't. We just do what we're comfortable with.
Mark, do you want to just quickly tell us about some of the insurance options that are available to people exporting?
Yeah, there's a variety of insurance options, and depending on cost and on benefit to the SME, there can be full complete insurance, or there can be some mid-range points. But there are we have finance facilities that have complete insurance backed, which will give that SME the assurance that they're going to get paid, and even on non-delivery. Well, one of the things that I'd like to point out, Matt, that also we find benefit for the SMEs is work with your local chambers of commerce, because within their membership you'll often find SMEs that maybe are further along the curve in exporting and growth, or maybe have already gone into those markets, and you just can't beat the experience or listening or the advice of other SMEs who've experienced the challenges in particular markets and how they overcame those hurdles. And irrelevant of what the product or the service is, many of the challenges will always be the same. And it was interesting on some of our trade missions that a lot of the benefit for SMEs has actually been spending time with other SMEs and just talking about business, irrelevant of what their particular business was about. It was about helping each other with such things that Andrew raised around non-delivery, and how do you overcome those challenges. So I would point also towards the Chamber of Commerce to get networked with other businesses in your local area to experience what's worked and what hasn't worked.
Brilliant, thank you. And Mark, do you want to just kind of tell us your closing thoughts, and perhaps what you'd urge any of the people listening in to do if they're just thinking of exporting now?
Yeah, I will, Matt. Thank you. Thank you ever so much for everybody listening in this afternoon. I hope you got some value. We in Santander will only be as good as really understanding you personally and your business aspirations. So we'd like to help if we can with the growth of your business. I think fundamentally, and Adam touched on it earlier, the brand of UK PLC, the brand of Britain across the world, has probably never been such a great opportunity for you. And some of the feedback we've had from UK SMEs is they've only ever traded in the UK because they've only ever been based here, and they've only ever thought that, you know, here was the market to realistically have reliable trading partners, or trading with markets that are closer to home. I think the world is such a smaller place now through technology and through connectivity, and I would urge every UK SME to say, is the opportunity for their growth here or close to home, or is it actually further away? And if it is, work with the right partners in order to get that opportunity realised for you. And I touched on a business that we worked with last year. You know, they were solely UK based from a trade perspective, and they're going to be working towards a business model that takes them 80% export into approximately 10 markets, that not only significantly changes their ambitions, but also significantly manages their risk as well, because this is about, exporting is about growth, it's also about risk management. And if you can do the two hand in glove with the right advice and the right support, the opportunity for UK SMEs to export is huge. So Matt, thank you for allowing us to facilitate and work with you and Adam on the call this afternoon.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks for your brilliant input. Adam, thank you too. Would you like to just wrap up for us with your closing advice as an entrepreneur that is exporting and growing your business to export, why other businesses can do the same?
Yeah, sure. I think I guess my main bit of advice is do it. I don't think there's ever been such a good time to export. We were fortunate enough to be one of the government's 50 food stars, which is a kind of an award for the promise that we have in terms of export. The government are totally behind British brands exporting. I don't think I've seen it in certainly 4 or 5 years we've been doing this, as much enthusiasm to get brands to export. And so as a result, there's lots of organisations out there, whether it be your bank or UKTI or Chambers of Commerce, etc. They're all trying to help you do that. There's a lot of friendly advice out there. And the market for British products, exactly like Mark said, is massive outside the UK. The UK is a great country and it's big in its own right, but there's a lot bigger market. So yeah, absolutely kind of look outside the UK and see what you can find.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you both. I think it's been a fascinating discussion. Hopefully you've all enjoyed it too, listening in. We will be sending you the recording, which you'll be able to re-listen and catch anything that you may have missed. And we'll also be emailing you details of our next webinars and live events as well. So on behalf of Santander Breakthrough Programme and Smarta, thank you all for joining.